latest podcast, The Heidelcast.
It's a Heidel minicast. And now, Scott Clark.
Begging versus raising the question.
If the Heidelcast helps you, won't you help us keep it going? Please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
You know what I have on my phone right here in front of me? You probably can't guess, but it's the Heidel app. It's a wonderful thing. It allows me to see everything that's on the Heidel blog in one place at one time. I don't have to open my email and get distracted by all of that stuff. And I don't have to, subscribe or any of that. It's just right here in the app. And all I did is go to the App Store and download the Heidel app. It's free. It doesn't do anything bad to your phone. It works. It's simple. It's elegant. And every day, a little number shows up in the app. It tells me that there's something new on the Heidel blog, and then I can see all the stuff. And then if I hit the little menu bars on the top left, that opens up and shows me all of the other things that I can see on the Heidel blog. So it's kind of cool. It really works.
The Heidelcast.
In this episode, I want to talk to you about another favorite writer of mine. Again, not a native English writer, but this is a text. My reading glasses on again. It's my a text in English translation. This is a text that's collected in a series of treatises and things collected under the heading of the Apostolic Fathers, which I think the collection goes back to the 17th century. So this isn't a thing you can't look at writers in the 4th century and see them reading or referring to a collection of texts called the Apostolic Fathers. This collection was compiled in the 17th century, but it's made up of texts from the 2nd century, I think, for the most part. I don't think there's anything in here that's much beyond the 2nd century. And there are a number of remarkable texts in this collection. One of them is the Epistle of Barnabas. If you've ever wondered what the early fathers, at least some of them, said about covenant theology, you could find that in Barnabas. If you wanted to know what the early fathers said, or at least one of them, early important pastor Ignatius of Antioch, what he said about the nature of church government and how important offices are and ministers, elders, and deacons are. You can find it there. You want to see somebody who's connected to the Apostle John, Polycarp. You can see him writing to the Philippians, and then there's an account of his martyrdom, which is a wonderful thing. In early church government, you can see that in the Didache, how they observed the Lord's Supper and baptism and some of the other rules that they observed. There's a bizarre text in here that gives you a good reminder that just because something happened in the 2nd century and is very ancient and was widely used and well regarded in the 2nd century, but is really very bizarre. So that, again, is a reminder that not everything that happened in the 2nd century was good, or that everybody had everything figured out. But one of my favorite texts is called, I think not entirely accurately, the Epistle to Diognetus. And it's really almost certainly, I think, in my view, and I think maybe in Chuck Hill's view, although I don't want to put words in his mouth, I don't remember exactly what he said about this, but in my view anyway, I think it's a speech that someone gave. Chuck argues that it was Polycarp who gave us this text, and he makes a pretty good argument for that, but it's a probable argument. It's not a certain argument. We don't know who spoke to or wrote to Diognetus, but if you read it as a speech, it's sort of like Hebrews, right? If you read Hebrews as if it were a sermon, then that changes the way you see it and you hear it, and I think that's true of Diognetus. Why do I enjoy Diognetus so much? Well, one, the theology is really remarkably well developed for a text that dates to AD 150. It's amazing. And this is a text with which I have pretty considerable sympathy. There are a couple of things he says that I probably don't agree with, but there's so much good here, and it's so mature. It's really remarkable. It's more advanced than a lot of other texts from the same period, but also it's well written. I've read one critic who said he thought it was the work of a schoolboy, and I've always found that puzzling because I don't think this person is a schoolboy. I think this is a pretty serious person who had a pretty good education and is trying to persuade Diognetus to come to faith in Christ. And let me read for you. I won't read the whole chapter, although it's not very long. It's divided up into verses, just the way our Bible chapters are. Altogether, it has here 17 verses, so it wouldn't take that long to read it, but I won't read the whole chapter, but just a little bit. This is the, I would say, treatise, but typically called the Epistle of Diognetus, chapter 5, and this is from Michael W. Holmes' edition, Greek texts and English translations, 3rd edition. For Christians are not distinguished from the rest of humanity by country, language, or custom, for nowhere do they live in cities of their own, nor do they speak some unusual dialect, nor do they practice an eccentric way of life. This teaching of theirs has not been discovered by the thought and reflection of ingenious people, nor do they promote any human doctrine as some do. But while they live in both Greek and barbarian cities, as each one's lot was cast, and follow the local customs in dress and food and other aspects of life, at the same time they demonstrate the remarkable and admittedly unusual character of their own citizenship. They live in their own countries, but only as non-residents. They participate in everything as citizens and endure everything as foreigners. Every foreign country is their fatherland, and every fatherland is foreign. They marry like everyone else and have children, but do not expose their offspring. They share their food, but not their wives. They are in the flesh, but do not live according to the flesh. They live on earth, but their citizenship is in heaven. They obey the established laws. Indeed, in their private lives, they transcend the laws. They love everyone, and by everyone they are persecuted. They are unknown, yet they are condemned. They are put to death, yet they are brought to life. They are poor, yet they make many rich. They are in need of everything, yet they abound in everything. They are dishonored, yet they are glorified in their dishonor. They are slandered, yet they are vindicated. They are cursed, yet they bless. They are insulted, yet they offer respect. When they do good, they are punished as evildoers. When they are punished, they rejoice, as though brought to life. By the Jews they are assaulted as foreigners, and by the Greeks they are persecuted. Yet those who hate them are unable to give a reason for their hostility. Well, there you go. I ended up reading the whole chapter. As I said, it's one of my favorites. And the thing I like about it rhetorically is the rhythm and the meter. It's very carefully crafted. There's contrast, and there are other features that he uses here. It's very economical. He doesn't waste words. It's, for that reason, very powerful. And I read this to my students every year. And every year I find it as affecting as it was the first time I read it. And if you're a reader, that's all you can hope.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Clark.
In this episode, I want to talk to you about the distinction between begging the question versus raising the question. There is rampant confusion between begging the question, which is known in Latin as petitio principii, or principii, you prefer, for raising the question. So begging the question is one thing, and raising the question is something else. And remarkably, it took me until 2016 to write a post about the distinction between the two. And maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but I'm going to do it again because, as somebody said, repetition is the mother of instruction. Now, let's get the definitions correct. To beg the question, and again, this is something you hear sports talk people doing all the time, getting this wrong. To beg the question is to assume the conclusion in the premises of a syllogism. Again, to beg the question is to assume the conclusion in the premises of a syllogism. So what's a syllogism? Well, the classic syllogism is this: all men are mortal. That's the first premise, or the major premise. Socrates is a man. That's the middle premise, or the minor premise. And the conclusion is, therefore, Socrates is mortal. So number one is the major, number two is the middle or the minor, number three is the conclusion. And this syllogism is both true and sound. That is, the premises are evidently true, and the conclusion follows from the premises. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which, by the way, is what Wikipedia could have been had they not decided to let anybody edit an entry, which has made Wikipedia almost completely unreliable. So please, please, please don't assume that somebody's supervising Wikipedia and making sure that everything is correct as it can be. Nobody is supervising these entries, or in other words, there's no subject matter expert who is overlooking these entries to make sure that they are correct. What happens with Wikipedia is that anybody who makes the largest number of entries and who gains thereby status comes to control these entries, and it doesn't matter whether they know anything or not. And as I've maybe mentioned before on this podcast, anybody can say anything on Wikipedia. And as long as no one corrects it or challenges it, it just stays. I remember listening to a couple of guys on a sports talk radio show log on to Wikipedia and change an entry to make fun of some athlete. And that's when I began to realize, oh, okay, this is not a serious thing. So the Stanford Encyclopedia is an edited online encyclopedia that is really a wonderful resource. So that's what I say. Wikipedia could have been the Stanford Encyclopedia, but they went in this radically democratic direction, which essentially ruined it. Anyway, the entry gives an example, which some apparently have criticized, and the example is this: are you still a member of the Ku Klux Klan? There are other well-known examples that I could use as a substitute, but I won't, because it's not worth the grief that they bring. But it's a fallacy because either response implies that one has been a member in the past of the Ku Klux Klan, a proposition that has not been established as true. It's a fallacious syllogism. There are implied premises in the question and a conclusion, which is also one of the premises. So if you express it as a syllogism, it's like this. Major premise: the KKK exists. Middle premise: you are a member of the KKK. Conclusion: therefore you are a member of the KKK. Right? The conclusion's a mere repetition of the middle premise. A better argument would be the KKK exists. That's the major. The middle: you have been seen wearing a white robe and a hood and attending Klan meetings. That would be the middle. Therefore, you are a member of the KKK. To be sure, it's possible that the hood wearer is not actually a member of the Klan. He could be Chip Hardesty. That was the character Jimmy Stewart played in the FBI story in 1959, when he was working undercover to investigate and prosecute the Klan. But ordinarily, the syllogism would follow. If we added, and your robe is marked Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, we added that to the middle premise, we might avoid the post hoc ergo propter hoc, because of which fallacy. If we eliminate this fallacy, however, the internet might collapse in on itself, since this is the fallacy that prompts and sustains a lot of social media discussion. Just for fun, here's the trailer from the FBI story from 1959.
This is a fellow named Chip Hardesty. To see him walking on a street, or in the familiar routines of a family man, or even in the daily pursuit of his job, you might not pick him out as something special. But there is something special about Chip Hardesty. It's so special, a whole big, tremendously exciting motion picture has been made about it. And men like him. So special, it has been given this proud and distinguished seal. This is the official shield of the FBI. Now, for the first time, you'll see the real, the authentic, the fascinating inside story of the FBI. Chip Hardesty was there from the very beginning. He was in Oklahoma when the Indians were being murdered out of their oil. He was in Chicago the night John Dillinger was finally cornered. He was there when the FBI closed in on some of the most dangerous public enemies in our history. He was equally at home in the dense jungles of South America as he was on a deadly spy chase through the caverns of New York. Chip Hardesty, whose far-flung adventures will amaze you, and whose love story will linger in your memory.
The Bureau had nothing to do with what happened tonight. And you're not going to quit it. I didn't marry a ditch digger or a robin. I married you. And you're going to stay in the Bureau because good or bad, that's where you belong.
Taking over the surveillance from Silvano and moving south in Central Park. We're blocked in. Take over.
Hardesty.
Subject just left subway. Is walking west on 46th Street.
Tell NY 21, if and when Whitey passes the coin, arrest them.
Mike, would you get those guns and get out of here? Now beat it.
He's got to get over the idea that every time I want to get into this house, I've got to outdraw it.
Well, there you go. 1959, James Stewart, Vera Miles, the FBI story. A different time. So, the middle premise, getting back to the syllogism, is the equivalent of Socrates is a man. Well, there probably are implied premises in both syllogism. It is assumed correctly that the KKK is evil and that anyone in the KKK is tainted with that evil. When dispensationalists accuse Reformed theologians of teaching so-called replacement theology, they are begging the question. That is, they are assuming what must be proved. Almost without fail today, whether on a media news program, in print, or in casual discussion, when one hears or reads the phrase begs the question, it's used to mean raises the question. For example, you hear this in government. Senator, you have proposed removing all American troops from Afghanistan. This begs the question, how do you intend to control the Taliban? Well, it's a typical abuse of begs the question. The interviewer means raises the question, and she thinks they mean the same thing. They don't. On its face, this confusion might seem to be an odd thing since raises is hardly an obscure or antiquated verb. Why then has begs replaced raises? Well, the answer is in two parts, rhetoric and psychology. Evidently, begs is perceived to have more emotional appeal than raises. That is, it is perceived to be a more emotionally powerful and affecting verb. I'm reasonably confident that it's also used because it sounds more learned. Consider the phrase, at the end of the day. In the early 1990s, virtually no Americans were using this expression. Today, one hears college football coaches using it in their post-game interviews. This means, I take it, that the expression has penetrated to every segment of society and is truly popular. Why? Well, it came to us from the UK, and Americans still think remarkably, that British English is more sophisticated, right? Look at any film when they need a bad guy, and you can ask Carl Truman about this. He's complained about this for decades. When Americans need a bad guy, oftentimes they use an Englishman, especially if the bad guy is particularly intelligent and that much more dangerous. So it seems sophisticated, and it gives the appearance of intelligence. The phrase, at the end of the day, is a metaphor, and metaphors seem smart. In the same way, begs the question must seem a more intelligent thing to say than raises the question, even though it's an abuse of the expression, which, ironically, to those of us who know what begs the question really means, and you're one of those now, makes the user sound less rather than more informed.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by Heidelberg Reformation Association.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
The best podcast.